just the Ahanta region, right? And this was where John Canoe was, in the middle of all that, fighting on behalf of not just the Ahanta people, but all people. And then his legacy grew, and his warriors were brought over um, to the Americas essentially, and his legacy grew and remained for over 3 centuries.
And the good thing is that since your installation all also coincides with you being a board member of the Pan African Museum that is
Yes.
being established, because we have the formative foundations and then the funding mobilization also taking
Oh
place.
yes.
How does that feed into the whole concept of making sure as black people we're able to realize our true selves, especially looking at our history of slave trade and why the diasporans need to come back to Africa and do the
Oh yeah,
reconnection?
certainly. Well, I mean, to put it plainly, it is who we are. You know, just to give one example, you have a plant here that you use. It's called Ninya, right? Ninya. And this plant we use in Jamaica and in the Bahamas, we call it sorsi. You know, it's all about reconnecting home. The old saying that Marcus Garvey made popular, a tree without its roots has no foundation, right? And so it's extremely important for us to reconnect. And if you notice, even the symbol on my neck, the Adinkra, Fenton Funfino, Denshin Funfino, the Siamese crocodile. One crocodile represents the diaspora in the Americas, the other on the continent. When one eats, both are nourished because we share a stomach. But if we fight against each other, we will surely perish. This is why it is so important. And the narratives, and this is a part of my life thesis, if you will, the narratives in the West are very much, they teach us that we must blame Africans because they were the ones that enslaved us and sold us into slavery. It's a very troubling victim blaming narrative. And it's up to us to seek ourselves out and to return home. And of course, this is all within the spirit of Pan Africanism. And I was elated to be included on the curatorial and educational board of the Pan African History Museum, particularly as I shared my Ahanta stories with some of the major stakeholders, people like Nana Kojo Yanka, Professor Pashington Obeng. I actually met one of the senior members, Dr. Sheila Walker. I met her at another conference that I spoke at in San Antonio, speaking about the history of the Ahanta.
In Texas.
Oh yeah, in Texas. Wow. The history of Ahanta, the history of Ghana. And the interesting thing about my research, it is one that counters issues of tribalism, it counters issues of this victim blaming narrative, that kind of pacifies us, particularly on a global black political scale. Because if you believe that your ancestors are responsible for your own genocide, and it's so strange. So we have to, as Africans, step back, put all of our differences aside, focus on what we share and what brings us together. Yeah.
And I know that back home, of course, you are known in private life as Christopher Edward Davis.
Yeah, yeah.
Back home also, you work extensively when it comes to the subject matter related
Certainly.
to the museum's establishment
Yes.
with Clifton Heritage Park and Museum back in Bahamas.
Yes, yes.
You take a look at what the present narrative is and how such projects like the Pan African Museum, and then what also you have also discovered in your professional life.
Certainly.
And then also the relationship that you have built, continue to build with those who very much are related and are interested in that story of ours.
Yes.
How can we make it better in relating to the traditionalists, the folks back home, and those in the diaspora?
Well, again, I'm a Garveyite, so I like to use Garvey's principles, right? And he said, look to Africa. That was his message for the entire diaspora. A lot of times that's misconstrued as a physical move to Africa, and it's not always so. He's talking about mentally, spiritually, politically looking to Africa. And today, I think we can all agree that Africa is not just a continent; it is everywhere where the diasporans congregate, right? So in the Bahamas, for example, much of my research has now been included into the national curriculum. So prior to people like myself, Dr. Michael Pateman, my other partner Robin Lightbourne, and other scholars in the Bahamas, we're really having this massive historical cultural revolution. And we push very hard. What we're doing right now, what people like you are doing, allowing me to have this platform to share this news to the world. And of course, curating our stories. And our stories have to come from us. Because as I mentioned before, when we let our stories come from the outside, and particularly a Eurocentric or whitewashed narrative, it's always harmful. We have to ask ourselves, why is it that Africans are the only people that are blatantly blamed for their own genocide? right? Something is wrong there. And of course, history is the greatest, and culture, those are the greatest unifying factors, right? And so as Akans or as Ghanaians, we can all come together based on our similarities, right? We have matrilineal societies, we have these things that bring us together. And it's extremely important for us to curate these things and to educate people, and it has to be put in our school curriculums, because you could bend the tree easier when it's younger, right? So if we learn about these things and re-indoctrinate ourselves within our culture and within the principles of Pan-Africanism and using our traditional values, but of course in a practical way, right? And in a practical way that suits us for today, right?
All right. So now that this is the main objective, and now you have this chieftaincy title, but also the more responsibility attached to it. Going forward, what should we be expecting in terms of that level of collaboration?
Oh, well, there's tons, I am a hunter. We've already had over 100 people from the Bahamas
Already?
take the pilgrimage to Zoo, as we call it, or the pilgrimage to Princestown. Princestown, Fort Friedrichsburg, that's the one that John Kwaw the first took over. And from there, for 8 years, he was able to fight ferociously against the transatlantic slave trade, right? And so we can expect much with the history. We can expect to see a huge interest. It's already happening, We've recently, in the last 2 years, had an ambassador appointed, His Excellency Andrew Wilson. That it was very much in tune with the work that we were doing. Of course, all of the kids in the Bahamas, they learn about the Ga people. The Ga people have a drum called gombe, right? And in the Bahamas, our national music outside of Jonquil was called gombe. And we used to use the square drum that they sit on, and it used to be very similar to that,
Easy for a lot of Panlogo locally.
Right, right. And again, when we immerse ourselves in our history and our culture, we realize that, hey, there's a lot much more for us to celebrate, and we have a lot more in common. To use an example, you look at the conservative mindset in the United States, where many people of European descent, they have these very racist values, call it for what it is. And when they all stick behind it. So when they talk about things like the Civil War, which was about ending slavery or keeping slavery, some wanted to keep it because it made a lot of money, and some wanted to end it. But they have this narrative of, oh, well, the Civil War was about our rights. And it's not true, but yet it still really unifies them, even though it's one big lie. Now, we're dealing with the truth. So what do you think the truth will do for us, right? And this could counter, as I said earlier, all of these issues of tribalism, because for every incident we could find where two tribes were against each other, our history is so complex, and that survival mode that was pushed on us definitely exacerbated many of our issues, right? Yeah.
And now, Safohene John Kwaw II.
Yes.
Okay. So now that this will be your last word towards it, what should we be expecting from you going forward?
Oh, well, there are much interest in investment projects, particularly centering around the Ahanta region. More and more Bahamians. We have a long list of people from the Bahamas that are going to be coming to Ghana. There are sister city deals. We've already signed sister city arrangements between places like Buzwa, where Buzwa Beach Resort is, of course, Princestown, Takoradi, and some of the cities and towns in the Bahamas. And of course, you will just expect to see a lot more of us coming to learn and immerse ourselves in that. And of course, we invite people to come to the Bahamas, where I work at Clifton Heritage Park. All of the structures that are there that are over 200 years old were built by a Fante man by the name of Cujo. So our connections to Ghana and in the world is quite profound. And I just encourage people to continue to watch. You can follow us on social media platforms. My NGO is Sankofa Flamingo, one word.
Sankofa Flamingo.
Yes.
One word.
Yeah.
Sankofa Flamingo.
Yeah.
Okay.
One word or 2 words, but if you
across
email
social
it,
media.
Yeah, across social media. And of course, me, Nana John Canoe II, also known as Christopher Davis. You can Google us, and we encourage you to follow him also on Instagram now. John Canoe, I as in John Canoe II. And I could go, we'll be here until tomorrow.
Yes,
talk
certainly.
about
I can clearly see
all of the projects. But there's so many, and particularly ones that deal with the youth exchange programs. And just in 4 weeks, we have about 17 university students from the Bahamas coming to take the grand pilgrimage to Zoo, the hometown of all Africans in the Bahamas.
Well, certainly.
Yes.
But it's been a privilege having you into the studio.
Yes,
and comprehensively, we'll find some time the next time you're on a visit.
Yes.
And then we'll have to sit down for an extensive discussion on how
Yes.
we can prolong this sort of relationship,
Yes.
and then also create the right sort of education,
Yes,
because the
thank you.
misconception
Oh yeah.
is long-standing and needs to be demystified. Is that not the case?
Yes. Oh yeah. Well,
Nana John Kane,
let's hope it's the first
Safohene
of many.
of the Ahanta people, right?
Yes, thank you.
Certainly, well, it's. I wish all the best.